Mike Mongo, vicepresidente del Grupo de Creadores de Ciencia Espacial Interestelar y la organización Icarus Interestelar.
Seconds.
Oh my gosh. How do I share this screen? Great. I'm ready.
Pamela, can you stop to share your screen, please?
I have stopped.
Okay.
I have stopped.
But in this moment, we are watching your screen.
Pamela, I loved your presentation, by the way. I don't know if you can hear me.
Thank you. I can. All right.
Don't stress. We'll get there.
Yeah. I've stopped sharing. All right.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Pamela.
Cool. Look at that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, yeah? Here we go. See if I can get this into some sort of view. Presenter view. How's that working?
Maybe change the slide for full presentation. Yes.
Full presentation, slideshow, excuse me. Like this?
Yes, perfect. Welcome again, Mike.
Hi, George Bueno. How are you?
I'm fine. The audience is for you. Welcome.
Blessings. Oh, is this can you see my Zoom window over here on the side? There.
Yes, we can see.
Oh, you can see it, so that with the Zoom window up, you can see it?
Yes.
So if I do that, you can see me? If
Yes,
I do that?
you can start. Go ahead.
All right. So we're started now, George. Is that what you're telling me? I'm talking to the audience right now?
Yes, right now.
Wonderful. First of all, greetings and salutations, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. It is an honor. I am a big fan of the Astrobiología Instituto in Colombia. George Bueno has introduced me in Colombia. He's the one who gets credit for that 2 years ago, I think. And I'm here today because of him and because of the IAC. And hopefully the message I have to deliver is worth hearing. So then we'll go from there. We'll start out with thanks, and then we're going to move on with the idea that the thing that I'm sharing right now is going to be very important and hopefully transformative, so that hopefully everyone who is listening right now will take away a piece of this message and carry it forward and make our world a better place. I believe that. It's happened before. I believe it will happen again. My name is Mike Mongo. I'm an astronaut teacher, which means that 14 years ago, when I was working as a marine science researcher, I got to make up my mind on my next career. And I wrote a book called The Astronaut Instruction Manual, which has been very well received and is being turned into a television series right now about the first kids in space. And it is my conjecture. I have a couple conjectures. I have a couple premises. One is that as a species, as a humankind, we have not really been to space until kids go to space. And the second is, and this is very important, the second is that we can solve all the challenges we face here on Earth by solving for space. Now, the interesting thing is those two things don't look like they match exactly. Let's see if I can close this. So they don't look like they match exactly, but in fact they do. And I can explain why. It's really simple. A friend of mine is Bruce Pittman at NASA, and he explained to me several years ago at the International Space Development Conference that when NASA scientists come across a challenge with space exploration, they create a challenge for students to solve it. And the reason being is that students don't have a filter in their minds that the challenge put in front of them is too difficult to solve. And so they go about and solve it. I'll give you a for instance. Asteroid mining asteroids is difficult. But what NASA did, I think it was the NASA Ames is where Bruce Pittman is. What they did was they posed it as a challenge, solve for asteroid mining, and they gave it to students. They gave it to teachers to give to students. And that could be young students in middle school and high school, because middle school students and high school students come up with amazing ideas. I'll share that in a little later. And it can also be college students. And what he found is when NASA gave challenges to students, but didn't tell them it was difficult or hard, students would go ahead and solve those challenges without any difficulty, really, because they applied creativity, which is probably one of our best human skills, and probably beyond human, actually. A lot of creatures use creativity. So when we allow students to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space, and that's what I do as an astronaut teacher, is I give students permission to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space. When we do that, it opens up a whole line of possibilities that may not have been there before. Now, I'm in the United States, and I'm from the United States. I'm actually in Key West right now, and I don't know if you can see it. I'm right at the water. It's a beautiful day out here. I'm very happy to share that. And in the United States, students are regularly taught that they can do anything. That's the idea, is that you can do anything that you want to do. But that's not how it always is with students around the world. And matter of fact, it's not always how it is with students in the US. In the US, many students who are rich or who have parents who are rich go on to believe that they are capable of more things than students who aren't born into wealth, financial wealth. That's a challenge. If you take that to a bigger stage, the world stage, I've been in countries, Haiti, for instance. When I was in Haiti, I've been in Colombia, and Colombia is actually really very developed compared to Haiti. So when I was in Haiti, when I said to students when I gave the students that I taught in Haiti permission to imagine themselves as the very first students from Haiti, the very first Haitian astronauts. When I gave students permission to imagine themselves as the very first Haitian astronauts, I want you to know, people listening right now, I want you to know that was the very first time in a lot of these students' lives that they had been given permission to imagine themselves as an astronaut. That's a big deal. You don't know what comes from it. It's like planting a seed. You never know what's going to happen when you plant those seeds. But I do know this: if we don't plant the seeds, nothing happens. So by going around and planting the seeds in students from Colombia and from Jamaica and from Haiti and from Mexico and from England and from the United States and from Canada, all of these students that I get to interact with, 10,000 students annually. This year was a little different, but maybe more because of all the classrooms I've been engaging with virtually. All those students that I give permission to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space now have a seed planted. And the funny thing about this particular seed is what they do with it is that's on them. But it's our job as grown-ups and as people who influence young students to plant those seeds of possibility. And as I said, there's two conjectures. One is that kids belong in space, and humankind hasn't been to space until kids are in space. And the second is, by solving for space, we solve all the challenges we face on Earth. My friend, the astronaut Dr. Sion Proctor, says, solve for space, solve for Earth. And this is very important. It's the most important thing. Second to giving permission to students to live, work, and play in space, to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space. Second to that, and by the way, Pamela Harmon's point, right, the speaker right before me, that we get to engage with people who are women and girls and students who are girls and give them permission and enable roles for them. We get to, Krista McCauliffe, the astronaut, says space is for everybody. And this is the case. And these are things that we as grown-ups and we as instructors and we as professors get to remember when we're engaging with students. That when we're giving them permission to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space, that student we may be giving permission to may not look like us. And if we use examples of success in the past to point to success in the future, if those examples don't look like the students that we're talking with, if they're not, what's the word, representative, that student may not see themselves in that position. If I were to show students the 12 people who have walked on the moon, it would be 12 US Americans who are white and men. And that disenfranchises over 6 billion, almost 7 billion people on the planet. But only a quarter of those are students. So let's say that cuts out 2 billion students around the world stop imagining themselves. No, okay, so then it would be, wow, it's about 2 billion students. If I as an instructor, I get carried away sometimes. If I as an instructor was only showing you the 12 people who walked on the moon as representative of people who walk on the moon, you might not imagine yourself as a person who could walk on the moon. In fact, if you're disabled, you might not imagine yourself at all. And the funny thing about people who are disabled, we think of people as disabled. We often think of people as disabled as kind of secondary. But here's another thing to think about. People who have disabilities, like mobility disabilities, are actually frequently better suited for zero gravity than ordinary abled people, because they're used to getting around in different ways. They're used to being flexible in getting from one place to another. So a person who can't use their legs, for instance, in space, well, that's not a problem. It's important to think about. These things that we think about open up opportunities for what is possible for students in space. Because when we talk about a permission to imagine yourself living, working, and playing in space, that we as grown-ups and we as professors and professoras get to be responsible for giving, for sharing with students, we get to open it up beyond the idea of what we call an astronaut. And this is super important. Tomorrow's jobs in space aren't astronaut. Tomorrow's jobs in space are space plumber, space ballerina, space dancer, space artist. When I'm engaging with students, I don't talk about Apollo astronauts. That happened 50 years ago, 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago, 50 something years ago. That's gonna not connect with today's students. When I talk with students, and it's funny because NASA and Boeing have both asked me on a couple occasions, how do we connect and get students as excited about space today as we did when we were launching people to the moon in the 1960s? And I tell them 2 words: space, Fortnite. And everybody laughs. Sometimes I say space, Minecraft. And everybody laughs. And it just depends on the room. If it's grown-ups, a lot of times I'll say space, Quidditch, because we know about Harry Potter. And the funny thing about Quidditch is we can play Quidditch in space. We're going to be doing, space athlete is a real thing. So why would we be teaching students today about yesterday's jobs in space when tomorrow's jobs in space are space hotelier, space hotel manager, space chef, space concierge, space retail store owner, space miner, space doctor, space nurse, space teacher? These are real jobs. These are real jobs. You know, how many of us, we all know students, hopefully we all know students. If you don't know students and you're on this, and you're listening to me right now, and you're one of the top space or science professionals or STEM professionals in the world, and you don't know students, I empower you to take your abilities and your talents to the students in your life and start giving them permission to imagine themselves living, working, and playing in space. It's our job as science and space professionals to encourage students. As grown-ups put those tools in our hands when we were kids, our job is to put these permissions in their hands. If you're a geologist, I hope you're talking to students about geology, because you became a geologist because some grown-up connected with you at some level and started putting things in your way. And it may have been one stone, one place that led to your career in geology. For instance, and I know a person, the astronaut Dr. Sian Proctor, who I mentioned earlier, she's a geologist. And her studying geology is what led her to becoming an astronaut. And so when we talk with students today about tomorrow's jobs in space, we don't talk about astronaut jobs. We talk about what they want, and this is how we get to connect with them. If they want to be a YouTuber, YouTuber is a big job. If a student wants to be a YouTuber, explain to them, tell them this. Have you imagined yourself as the first space YouTuber? Or how about being a space YouTuber? Like a YouTube channel from the moon. Imagine all the fun stuff you could do from the moon. Yeah, there's a lag, but yeah, do we have internet on the moon? Absolutely. It's the future. It's amazing. So whatever you imagine possible is what's possible. It's funny when we talk about the future, we talk about dorky things like flying cars. But, who knows what's going to show up with AI, which I call authentic intelligence. With AI, it's possible we could have flying cars. Presently, with just human beings, there's no way I would drive in a flying car because we're so terrible on 2 dimensions, just right and left and back and forth. I mean, on the roads, adults and grown-ups driving cars are not the most reliable. It's a little tricky. You have to drive defensively. Imagine if we were using a flying car. So let's imagine a future that's a lot more interesting than a flying car. Let's imagine a future that's in space. And the reason we're imagining a future in space, I said there's 2 conjectures. One is that we're not a humankind. We're not really in space until kids go there. And the other is that when we solve for space, we solve for Earth. And how that works is that by solving for space, we solve for energy, we solve for health, we solve for inclusion, diversity, we solve for equity. That means everybody getting a piece. We solve for the illusion of scarcity. The illusion of scarcity by solving for space. We solve for the illusion of scarcity. And sharing that phrase, the illusion of scarcity, we have a whole solar system around us filled with resources. There's no such thing as not enough. We just got to figure out how to distribute a little better. And if we look at society and how Earth is, we can juxtapose that against space and think, how would we do it better? How would we make it so that everybody has enough? And this is an important part as I'm moving through these topics, because I'm talking with people from a science institute based in Colombia. In Colombia, I got to talk with many of the professors and professoras at Universidad Bolivariano Pontificia, UPD, in Medellin. And there is a discussion about something called STEM plus H, which is STEM plus the humanities, and how to get students involved in STEM plus H. And Pamela a moment ago talked about getting women and girls involved in STEM plus H. It is so easy. If we just put an umbrella over everything, that every facet of STEM has to do with space. If UPB's entire curriculum had a space direction, if there was a space minor that you could apply to any curriculum, space textiles, because they have a terrific textiles program at UPD, we would be able to get so many students involved in STEM. And you know what? A Colombian space program is a terrific idea because of the location, the geographic location of Colombia. It has a coastline. That's a great place. It's close to the equator. It's easier to launch from Colombia than it is from many other countries. Colombia has a natural geographic advantage for a space program. So imagine this. Okay. Wow. Where am I time-wise? I better check. Let me check. I got a clock here. All right. We're good. Listen to this. This is great. Colombia could have an amazing space program, and it's really easy. I have a model that it could apply. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this slide thing. Next slide. How do I do that? Oh, it worked. Wrong one. There it is. In the United States, there's this guy right here. I hope you can see this. His name is we call him Johnny Appleseed. He's a famous U.S. American folk hero. And his real name is John Chapman. And this actual person, we don't know almost anything about him except for people's reports. We know that he existed. We know that he was sort of a wild man. We know he had a great sense of humor. We know he never hurt children. He never hurt people who are women. He never hurt people who are Native American. He was friends with many, many tribes, several tribes. He helped people who were African American. He was generous. He was not obsessed with financial wealth. This is one of these rare human beings that all of us can take on as a role model. And as a teenager, he decided that his life work was to plant apple seeds. And this is a 100% true story. One of those rare true stories that I'm so happy to be able to share. And Johnny Appleseed in the United States went from one coast all the way to the middle of the United States and planted apple seeds 40 years of his 60 years or 40 years of his 60 years of life. He planted apple seeds. He planted tens of millions of American apple seeds. It's a fruit. And these fruit trees allowed people to cultivate the land and to pioneer and to stake claims and to homestead and to grow communities. And now the funny thing is, the other thing that Johnny Appleseed spread around this unpaved territory, walking barefoot, as this illustration shows, wearing a pan on his head, as this illustration shows, telling jokes to kids and entering communities and surprising everybody, and giving away apple trees and planting apple trees, tens of millions, is that it paved the land, it paved the way for the development of a nation. Without Johnny Appleseed, the U.S. happens, of course, but it happens better and so much smarter with Johnny Appleseed. With this one person who we know very little about, except that they went around and planted apple seeds, the U.S. becomes the nation it is today. It's an amazing and true story. Very rare that there's such a pleasant human being on the planet. They didn't even write about themselves. That's how little we know about them. We know about only report what they look like, and that's how we get this image. Rough clothes, barefoot. And Johnny Appleseed is a terrific model for what is possible for all of us here in the future. If our objective is not to pride ourselves or to make a big name for ourselves, but our objective is a world that works out for everybody, which is a terrific objective, by the way. Johnny Appleseed is a terrific role model for that, because we can do the same thing. In the way that Johnny Appleseed planted apple seeds, we can plant the seeds of the idea that tomorrow's jobs are in space. And we can explain why, because solving for space solves for Earth. And we can say that, and we can also share with students that whatever they want to do on Earth, they can do in space. I mentioned space athlete and space Quidditch. In the United States, this American football is a very popular sport. And around the world, football, soccer is a phenomenal sport. And all these students want to play. I know so many students who want to play in India, for instance, cricket, a sport called cricket. Well, there's a very big competition to be a professional cricket player or football player or American football player. Big competition. But there's only a certain number of jobs. There's only a certain number of professional athlete jobs. When I talk with students, I ask them, show of hands, and it could be a room of 500 people. I'll show you. It look like this. I ask the students, what do you want to be when? What job do you want to be in? And who wants to be a professional athlete in the room? Students will, and half the room will inevitably raise their hand. This is true. And then I explain how many actual jobs there are as professional athletes to the students, and how many people are after those jobs. Like this is a 6th and 7th and 8th graders. It is on the screen right now. I explain how many students there are in the world after those jobs, and how many students you're in competition with. However, have you, the students, I say to them, have you ever imagined yourself as the first space footballer? Imagine playing football on the moon. Imagine playing soccer on the moon. Imagine playing cricket on the moon. Imagine playing tennis on the moon. Imagine playing golf on the moon. There's actually been, like, one of the astronauts brought a golf club and golf balls to the moon. Imagine inventing a space sport. Imagine inventing a sport that is as popular in space as basketball is on the Earth. Imagine that. And in the room, I want you to know that everybody's minds unlocks, not from restrictions, but possibilities opening up. Because young students haven't given themselves restrictions. And this age group right here, middle grade students, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, is when students begin to imagine themselves in careers. And I am one of those people that opens up, I just give them an add-on for that. If they, one time I said, any job that you can imagine doing in space, on Earth, you can do in space. And this one young woman raised her hand right immediately, just like that. And I said, yes. And she said, space equestrian. Now, an equestrian is a person who rides a horse. So how are you going to be a space equestrian? How are you going to be an equestrian in space, right? As a grown-up, I get to be flexible and creative, just like I'm working to encourage in students. And so I got to explain how we could have a space station that's giant, shaped like a can in space, spinning really fast. And I got to explain centripetal force, centripetal motion, and how when we have something spinning, that inside, if it was a can, anything inside it that is spinning is going to be thrown to the inside of the can. So if we had a giant space station spinning in space, we could have horseback riding. Next question. And we get to, so when students say to us, can I be a video game coder in space? Yes, of course, absolutely. Can I be a doctor in space? A surgeon in space? Certainly, it'd be amazing. Think about this, space, how it coagulates and how it floats in space. Think about that. All of the opportunities and possibilities. And I'd like to encourage students to imagine themselves in the highest expression of themselves. I'd like to unlock all the possibilities and let them see themselves as the savior of the world. I get to explain to students all the time that the person who invented television was 14 years old. His name was Philo Farnsworth. And he saw wheat, a grain, and wind will blow over a grain, like wind's blowing right here, and cause this motion. And then it starts to show shapes. And as a 14-year-old with an open mind, Philo Farnsworth saw that and imagined, what if those were light bulbs switching on and off? You can make pictures. And he wrote that paper at 14 and gave it to his teacher. And then as he grew up, he proceeded to create television, to craft television from the materials that were available to him as a farm boy. And he invented a television until in his 20s, his early 20s, RCA, the big company, sued him saying that no, they had invented television and there was no way a kid could invent television, a farm kid at that. And in the courtroom, and this is a true story, I love these true stories. In the courtroom, his teacher joined him. The teacher from when he was 14 years old. And guess what? That teacher, she kept the paper he wrote describing how he indeed had invented television and where the idea came from. And that's how I know that everything is possible. That any student in our classrooms may be the most important student on earth. It may be the most simple idea that changes everything. I always say that the best ideas, the really good, true ideas, have to be simple enough that we can explain it to a 5-year-old. And that anything that we can't explain to a 5-year-old is in question, to be matter of fact. And so, as I was saying, that Johnny Appleseed is an excellent role model for space exploration, and that Colombia would be an amazing place to have a space program, a fantastic place to have a space program. And I work on that. Because I love Colombia. I would love to be one of the people helping to lead the Colombian space program. Because I saw in Colombia how people are, the grown-ups, professores and professors were dedicated to encouraging students in STEM plus H careers and seeing the challenges. And I have a solution, a Colombian space program, a launch facility on the coast of Colombia. And these ideas happen like by planting the seeds in the minds of students. We get to make that happen. We get to make it happen every single day of our lives from here on out. If you're listening to this today, I empower you to be an astronaut teacher in your community. I empower you to every student that you meet, let them teach you how to engage with them, to encourage them to be the next generation of space explorers from planet Earth. I get to empower you. I get to give you who are listening right now permission. I get to, you. I get to give you permission so that when you come in contact with a student in the line at the grocery store, at a library, in a classroom, when a student comes to you and poses a question that you have a unusual answer. What about in space? Have you imagined a Colombian space program or wherever in the world you may be? And then when they tell you it's impossible and it can't happen, you tell them about Johnny Appleseed. You tell them about Philo Farnsworth. You tell them about a hero that resonates with you. And watch where they'll take us. I want you to know that here's where they're going to take us. They're going to take us to the future. And it's going to be amazing. There's going to be a place in it for all of us. Everything working out. When Kristen McCauley said space is for everybody, she meant all of us in the world. We don't get to divvy up the moon for only a portion of the planet. We don't get to say that that just because a country gets to the moon, like China or the US or Russia or whoever, that they get to claim it. The moon is a birthright of all of us, everybody alive on the planet. And if people want to go to the moon and curry it out, spread it out to a few, I said, I'll make that agreement in exchange for this. If everybody in the world gets clean water, clean food, healthy food, education, medical services, as shelter, if we can make that for everybody, then they can have the moon. That's the trade I'm willing to make, because there's a lot of resources on the moon. There's something called H3, which can power something we call clean fusion. It's possible. And I'm willing to make that trade as long as everybody gets a piece of it. And that's called equity. That's the future that we're talking about. We're not talking about a future of 6 people, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the Koch brothers, all of these billionaires, or a single nation like China, which is really just like a big capitalist country, if you ask me, because when we treat people like resources, then we're just acting like a capitalist company. Everybody gets a piece of it. We all get health. We all get well-being. I just heard a sound go off. I don't know if that's a timing thing. Oh, we're still good. George, is it possible that I think that I've got it to a place where I'm really happy. I'd like to hear from anybody who's there, have some discussion. Testing.
We have a lot of questions.
Okay.
And for example, Daniel Rodriguez from Cali.
Hi, Daniel.
Yes. Tomorrow, NASA and SpaceX will have the next launch to the space station. I am educator. I am teacher. The kids, for example, astronauts are the main reference for kids in their motivation for space. There are other space jobs. How to motivate the kids to become interested in being a biologist, chemist, or astronomer, and not only astronaut?
This is a great question. Thank you, Danielle. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't tell them that astronaut. So when I explain, this is a great question. When I explain to students about the next jobs in space, I call the next generation of space explorer humanairs. That's Humannaires. Humanairs, like millionaires or legionnaires. Humannaires. And students, when I explain that the next generation of students of space explorers are going to be humanairs, people who live, work, and play in space, students automatically reevaluate that. I tell students that if you Google new spacesuit, you see that the new spacesuits are really sleek. They're modern. They look like superheroes. They don't look like those big, bulky Apollo suits that if you fall over, you can't get back up. The new spacesuits are superhero costumes. They look like Marvel superhero costumes. The other thing about this, Danielle, that I want to share is that we just give students, the very first thing, I do it like this, Danielle, and everyone. I ask every student what they want to be when they grow up, what jobs. And if they want to be athlete, they have to give me two answers, because every professional athlete I know is like also a lawyer or an accountant or a business owner or a construction work, all these different things that professional athletes are, in addition to being professional athletes. So I ask every student, wherever I am, what they want to be when they grow up. What job that they want to have when they grow up, not what they want to be. What job they want to have when they grow up. And then they all have answers. And if they say professional athlete, they have to give me two answers. And then I say, okay, now imagine doing that job in space. How is that possible? Tell me. And they have to explain. Usually they write it out. Talk about your job that you want to be, that you want to have in space. And that's how I do that, Danielle. So most students, by the way, if they want to be a biologist or a geologist, we get to open the opportunity and possibility of these jobs. That's what we do as teachers and educators. That's regular. And then we just add on space. A lot of students, most students have an idea. They want to be a comic book artist. They want to be a botanist. I know plenty of space botanists. I know several space lawyers. Next question.
Okay.
I hope that answered it.
Let me 1 second. In honor of you, I'm use my glasses. Yes. Okay. I'm okay. Like you. Can you see?
Thank you, George. George, you got to bring it a little lower on your nose. A little lower. Bring it down a little lower on your nose. Like
okay.
this.
Okay. Mike.
Yes.
The next question is Marta from Medellin.
Medellin.
Okay. Yes, let me, if I can do a correct translation. I have two kids, 10 and 12 years. In the school, they don't understand science, don't understand nothing when the teacher explains. But when I use the science fiction in my house with movies, with books, they understand everything. Is there any possibility, or do you have any recommendation for the teachers to change the curriculum or different tips inside the classroom to motivate the kids in the science? Because in my case, my kids understand through the science fiction. Yeah.
George, what was their name? Who asked that question? Martha, thank you for asking this question. Now, let me point out a problem or a challenge that we face. Depending on where a student is or what school they're at, a student in a very urban environment or a very rural environment will find challenges, because in both those settings, very urban and very rural, the focus is on teaching basic skills. The most basic skills. They don't have extra electives. Usually in these communities, they're not wealthy. And so they give them, we as a society, give people in poor communities less resources. We don't have to accept that. We get to change that. I fight with this all the time. It's a battle I do not mind. I love this battle because I want to fight another battle by succeeding at this one. The next battle I want to fight is having enough for everybody. After we succeed, having education for everyone. Education leads to having enough for everyone and equity. When students are learning, are resistant to learn about science, we get to show them, we get to take other ways, like the way that you have, Marta, by using science fiction to teach basic science. A lot of science fiction is silly. It's fantasy. It's entertainment, like superhero movies. And then there's places even when I was growing up, I learned a lot of science from comic books, from Batman comic books. They would always talk about science in Batman. Batman was a detective, so he got to use different science practices in order to solve crimes. That happened all the time. And it made me pay more attention to science. If you're using science fiction, whatever it is that makes the student connect to the thing that is important that you think is important for them, and that you see a place for them in the future, then make it available. Be flexible, be creative. Remember though, not every student wants to be a scientist, which is fine. Not every student wants to be a mathematician, which is sad because math is awesome. But
Yes.
some students don't know that engineer is a job. And when we show them what an engineer is, they're like, oh yeah, that's what I want to be. When we ask students why they want to be lawyers, they almost every single time they tell me, because I want to make a lot of money. Well, that's not an automatic. So if they want to make a lot of money, then we get to explain finances to them, and finances is how we get to explain math. And so see the different paths we can take to get to our goals. So science fiction is an excellent way to communicate, and you can participate with your education system, your school, or your students' education. In fact, being a parent or being a person who has a student in their life, participating in their education is probably the most important thing we can do as grown-ups, because we don't have to change the world. We just have to change one student, and they'll change the world for us. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks,
Yes,
Martha.
you're right, Mike. For example, I saw in my biology class one time in genetics topics, my students, they are very, very bored when I used X-Men movies for explain genetics, change everything.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can do understand with Wolverine, Charles Xavier, Magneto. Yes, it's easy. It's a different way.
We can also use X-Men to explain evolution. Like, what evolutionary situations would demand that we grow claws out of our hands, like Wolverine, for instance? What what conditions in nature would have us evolve to be able to breathe underwater? And did you know that there are people on an island in the world who have developed capacities to see underwater better than all the rest of us? They can see under the water as well as fish. We in our lifetimes, human beings have evolved. And so then we get to talk about evolution. Then we get to talk about Darwin. Then it leads to science. How we learn that this takes place, the experiments, the scientific method. Excellent example, the X-Men. You use whatever method, whatever thing connects with students. They will teach us how to connect with them. Next question.
Mm-hmm. Next question. In your experience as a teacher, what are the problems that you find to do the science and education priority in a country?
That's a great question. It is usually adult greed.
The person is Juan Carlos.
Juan Carlos.
From Bogota.
From Bogota. Juan Carlos, it is usually greed. It is usually short-sightedness is the one battle I fight all the time. When in the US, we used to give money to the education system. I'm in Key West, which is an island at the very end of Florida. It's right above Cuba. And up in the mainland, we used to, the government would fund all the education. In my lifetime, they created a game called lottery. And lottery, you buy tickets and maybe you win big money. Most people don't win. And that's how they fund it. It makes all this money. And so they sold it to us that we would use this money that we make from the lottery by all the people buying tickets and losing to help fund education. In my lifetime, we no longer fund education. We just use money from the lottery to pay for the education system. All the money that we used to give to education system is gone. The only money we get for education in Florida comes from the lottery now. And they think that that's an advantage. And so I argue about the damage that gambling causes in families and in communities. And that it was terrific that we could supplement education system with lottery if that was the plan, but not replace the funding of education with lottery money. And it's these sort of short-sighted things, which again, have to do with people making money, have to do with people and politicians that we get as citizens, we get to fight for, because students don't fight for that. As grown-ups, it's our job to take a stand for the important battles. So Juan Carlos, we don't fight for everything. We find one battle that we can fight, and we are in charge of that. And if it's one battle in one community at one school, let that be the battle. If it's your neighborhood, that's the important thing then. Don't think that by only doing something in your neighborhood, in your school, in your community, that it doesn't affect the entire world. On the contrary, the little things we do affect everything. There's enough of us. Here's Juan Carlos, by the way. If we changed how we look at what we are as grown-ups and what problems we're working on, we can solve everything right now. If we as a humankind, as a society, decided that as a planet, we are going to work on how to make everything work out for everybody, we're going to put all our mind to that. Just think about it. All of us deciding that we are now going to work on making everything work for everybody. Not in a militant way, in a way that people have lives and respect, and that there's enough for everyone, because there is enough for everyone. It's just about distribution. We have some people with too much and too many people with not enough. That's just how we are as a species. Think of it as like ants, the way that different ants have different jobs. So billionaires have the job of holding resources and distributing resources in a certain way. Well, we know that evolution takes place. So let's evolve as a society so that we diminish the resources or better distribute the resources that billionaires have. And we can do that with taxes. It's a really simple way. We just have to agree that that's our goal. All right. I hope that answered the question, Juan Carlos. Next question.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Diana in English. I am teacher in a public school. I don't know is there any difference in the United States between public and private schools, but in Colombia, we have a big hole in between the two schools. When you explain about the science with the students, with teachers, I love that. But in my real life, inside the classroom, maybe it's not possible because we are victim of the public and government rules about education.
Okay, Diana, George, I got this. Hold on, cut it right there, because let me.
Yes. Do you have any recommendation, Mike?
Yes. All right, here it is. I got it. Diana, here's the thing: is that in the United States, it is the same way. We have it's a gulf. It's a space between the private and the public. The private schools have better resources.
To do science in a specific topic for Diana. Mm-hmm.
So Diana, the opportunity is this. Colombia is a great example of this. Colombia has a success that Colombia achieved that is a model for the entire world. It is the violence and criminal situation that existed in Colombia 20 years ago. It was the situation where everybody was being killed and because of crime. It happened. And Colombia doesn't ignore that. It doesn't deny it. It has celebrations in honor of the people that died. And at some point, Colombians decided that's not how they want to live. That's not how you want to live. And you changed your society so that it works out for everybody. That means both sides got to forgive the other side. I know it's not perfect, but it's better than most models in other countries. Other countries have been fighting for hundreds of years for one fight. And Colombia is an example of what is possible. So if there is this disparity, this gulf between students who have and students who do not have in Colombia, and it's affecting education, it can be changed. Colombia already has an example. When Colombians found something that was not acceptable, Colombians changed that for the entire society. This is one of those things, Diana. Education can be one of those things. It's not something that changes today. It's not something that, well, in a way it is, when we make up our mind. It's not something that changes in one day. It's not something that changes tomorrow in one day. It's steps. And enrolling people, getting people around you to agree with this view, it may take 5 years. But can you imagine if you changed everybody's mind in 5 years' time? If you got someone like me, an ally, and say, hey, will you participate in this, in getting us to make sure that we have resources on both sides? The people who are wealthy have resources and the people who are not wealthy have resources. And there's an advantage to Colombia, the nation, for this, and to all the people, because God does not decide only the rich people have talent mentally. The universe does not decide that poor people do not have talent or skills. That doesn't work like that. We never know who the next Madame Curie or Albert Einstein or Joan of Arc or any person that has had great influence in the world. We don't know that. And so if we don't invest in every student that they might be that important person, then we're literally we're throwing away resources. And that's the art. That's what you get to, Diana, that's what you get to tell people in your community. By not investing in students, we are undermining Colombia or whatever country it is. Thank you. Next question.
It's right, Mike. And it's the same situation in the universities when you compare private and public universities.
Same. It's the same. George, did you know I didn't have my microphone plugged in this whole time? I hope my sound was good.
Okay. Mike, the last question, it's not question, it's a solicitation. Can you give us a message, a recommendation, tips for the new educators in Colombia and South America for to do best science in my classroom, in my life? Because in this situation for the COVID pandemic, we know the science is the key. The science is the future, not only for Colombia, for the rest of the countries, for the rest of the world, but we need to inspire the new generations. Do you have any recommendation for the new educators?
Yes.
According to your experience?
Who asked the question?
Michelle from Ecuador.
Michelle, thank you very much. This is a beautiful question. And it reminds me that in that we know that science will lead the way and make the world a better place. And yet, if we don't have a core truth when we're pursuing science, then we may as well just be spinning our wheels or running in place. For me, the most important thing in the world is love. Our love for our parents, our love for our families, our love for one another, our love for our girlfriends or boyfriends, our love for the people in our life, our love for our teachers, our love for our guardians, our love for our mentors, our love for our work, our love for our pets, our love for our plants. If we don't have our love for our planet, our love for space, if we go forth without that love, let me rephrase that. If we carry that love into every single thing we do, it's going to make everything work out. We get to carry that love forward. Like for me, in the United States, there's a man who's president. His name is Donald Trump, and it looks like he doesn't have love in his life. It appears to me that he's one of these people that has had a long life and has a lot in it, but hasn't had enough love. And we start to love others by loving ourselves. And it's really simple. When we show that to students, when we show that place inside of us that wants love, we send love to that. And by loving ourselves, we can start loving everything around us. And it makes science worth doing. Now, there was two components to this question. One was about COVID. When up until in the before, I used to travel all over the place. I traveled to Colombia, and I used to travel and go to classrooms and speak with other educators about how to talk with students. And then COVID hit. Well, suddenly I was not able to communicate with students anymore, and I got to shift. I didn't have to. I got to, and I reinvented myself as a YouTuber. I'm 55 years old. It is not an easy thing to immediately become a YouTuber. And I did. And it became very successful. It's just one of those things. It's not like I have tens of thousands of subscribers. I don't even have 1,000 subscribers yet. And yet I have successful videos. And I'm outreaching, and some of the students I'm reaching all over the world are connecting with me. They're sending me messages on DM on Instagram a lot, and on Twitter and emails and LinkedIn and all of these places that they communicate. And I get to figure out, sometimes a student will ask me something that I can't personally help with, but I get to connect them with somebody who can. And so, is it Michelle? Michelle, we can connect. Don't think about what we can't do. Think about what we can do. That's my answer. Don't think about what we can't do. Think about what we can do. It's going to be enough. It will work.
Mike, of my point of view, maybe it's not a scientific answer, but is the best answer of the conference.
Thank you.
The key in this planet, the key for the politics, the key for the education is the love. Yes.
It's love. It is. Thank you.
Yes, maybe it's not scientific answer. Yes, I know.
Maybe.
But repeat, is the best answer. Mike, you are a great person. You are the best human. Thank you for sharing with us your knowledge. Really, you are maybe not astronaut teacher. You are a universal teacher. You are. Thank you so much. For me, it's a pleasure to have your friendship for Colombia. I hope the next time you can visit after the pandemic situation. And really, for me, it's a pleasure. Really.
That's the highest honor.
Your answer change minds. Your answer change the life. Really, I don't have more words to describe when you can feel, when I can hear you. Oh my God, really, sometimes you are thinking in money, you are thinking in things, to have things, but the key is the love. Thank you, Mike, really. This is the best question, the best answer in this conference. Thank you, my friend. Y quiero darle las gracias. Give me some moment for translation. Las palabras que ha dicho Mike, le decía que no tengo las palabras para describir. Es una respuesta no científica. Este congreso es científico, pero él ha dicho que la clave de todo esto es el amor por este planeta, el amor por la vida, el amor por tu familia, el amor por ti mismo. Y creo que eso es lo que salda las diferencias que nosotros mismos hemos creado como seres humanos. Le decía a él que no es un astronaut teacher, es un universal teacher, es un profesor del universo y es un placer para mí tener su amistad y sobre todo que podamos escucharlo y compartir ese conocimiento. Para quienes no alcancé a darle trámite a sus preguntas, lo pueden seguir en las redes sociales que están en esta última diapositiva. For the rest of people, sorry, I don't have more time. Please follow to Mike Mongo in the Twitter, Instagram, in the social network. Mike, thank you so much. A big hug for you and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, George. Thank you, IAC.
Thank you so much.